Well, this next passage, this next couple verses, is just guessing. I don't think anyone knows. Well, it's not. Maybe that's not true. Maybe God has revealed more about what this really means here. But Matthew is the only one that wrote about this, which doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It's just that he's the one that really focused on it. The others, maybe some of them didn't know about it. I don't know. But this is in the tradition right here. This is in the Gospels. This is so cool. Christian tradition of another miracle at the time of death, burial, resurrection. Let me read it. If you want to open your Bible, like to this, Matthew 27, verse 51, 51b, the second part. Well, let's read the whole verse. It says, and behold, check this out. Look at this. The veil of the temple was torn in two, rent in two different pieces. Remember that? We talked about in the last video, I believe. From the top to the bottom. Woo! And the earth, here it is. And the earth did quake. It was an earthquake. Massive one. A big one. And it says the rocks right here, the stones were rent. That same torn, that renting, was the same word that was used that about the veil happening. Now, some people have suggested that earthquake is what caused the renting of the curtain. The earthquake happened, and then I don't think so. It was too thick, 4, 5, 6, 8 inches thick or whatever, that large thing. I don't think I just don't think an earthquake would tear it. It would shake it like this, but to tear that thick thing and then for all that distance, 60 feet, 80 feet maybe, I don't think so. But I think that was God literally that's ripping it like this, the veil. But I believe this was absolutely God doing an earthquake, partially because of an anger thing, partially because just, the convulsion of this earthquake, this probably wrath of God, and just a sense of creation itself was feeling it. Well, creation can't think, dirt can't think, rocks can't think, they don't have minds or souls, no. But it was God, and he was shaking it. And I think it's possible there seems to be writings outside of the Bible that it was pretty wide, that earthquake. The darkness might not have been as wide as the earthquake. The earthquake maybe went further, and there's evidence of an earthquake that happened right at that time. And then the next verse, this is where it gets, what? Say what? Wow. It says, and the graves were open. Graves, tombs, people's graves where they were dead and buried, they were open. Now that, I think, could have been the earthquake. The earthquake shook it, and tombstones just kind of rolled or split open. The rocks were torn, it says that, like that. So it was pretty shaking time. By the way, if I was standing there and seeing all this, I'd say, darkness, earthquake, who is this man dying on the cross right now? And it happened right at the time of his death, 3 o'clock, or right after, right then. I think it happened right then. The tearing, the earthquake, right there. By the way, it did affect, and we'll get into this next verse, one of the soldiers, when he saw the earthquake, it says. All right, let's go on. And by the way, not just him, but the others that were with him. But anyway, it says the graves were open. That's kind of freaky, kind of creepy type thing. Like graveyards are open. Not everyone. It goes on and tells who. It says that many of the bodies, literally the bodies of the saints. Now, at that time, well, it says, let me read on. It says, many of the bodies of the saints that had died rose up. Whoa. Now, my personal opinion, the next verse tells when they rose. I don't think it happened at a death. Now, there's a lot of Christian people who study the Bible a lot who say it happened right at the death, that people actually raised from the dead. My personal opinion, because of what he says next, although it sounds like it rose right then, but I think it was first Jesus rose from the dead 3 days later. After him, because the Bible does say he was the first fruits of God's thing. First him, it says in 1 Corinthians 15, and then others. So first fruits means you get first fruits and then you get other fruit later. It was the first harvest. It was Jesus Christ and then them. They raised from the dead. And I'll tell you what I think why this happened here. But it says, and came out of the graves after, it says, let me read it again. The graves are open. Many of the bodies of the saints, which, were dead and they were kind of in a sense of sleeping, the Bible calls it. They were dead. Rose and came out of the graves after his resurrection. Now, it's interesting that Matthew put it here and not later, but I think he wanted to kind of mention this. Like I tell stuff, I'm talking and I say, oh, by the way, this is coming up, this happened, and it's so exciting, all the news. And I'll say stuff before it happened. I think he put it here. Maybe he didn't want in chapter 28 here, coming up here, when it talks about Jesus raising from the dead, he wanted to focus on Jesus and what happened with him. That story, that pericope is what it's called. But anyway, here, he actually mentions it and slides it in right here. Like, hey, guess what? P.S. Or he inserted it here. And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose. Now, if it is possible, I'm not saying, this is like a lot of guessing here. And we'll not know until Jesus Christ comes back and heaven happens, I believe. Although there have been writers that has mentioned this, but he's either witness to it. Maybe he's the one that actually witnessed and saw it, or he heard of others. He's heard that's part of the story. He said, I'm going to put it in there. It says, and the graves were open, and many of the bodies, many, not all of them, were of the bodies. So maybe Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and then he chose to bring others. And I'll go a little deeper in that in a second. Then it says, it came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city. What's a holy city? Jerusalem. It's named like that all the time. It even says it in Matthew 4, where at the day of the temptation, remember Satan took him to the Jerusalem, the holy city. It's called the holy city a lot, Old Testament and all. And appeared unto many. These bodies literally came and appeared to many. Now, who are these saints, the holy ones? I don't know. But it sounds like it's maybe some of the heroes in the faith. Who knows? Maybe Abraham, Moses, David, Ruth, some of them were maybe back then. Or maybe it was disciples of Jesus who had died, or people that the people knew and appeared unto them. It didn't say they appeared everywhere. They probably did what Jesus did and went to their families and friends. Can you imagine? Grandpa, what? That would be like, what? You're alive, and what type of body did they have? It doesn't say it. It sounds like their bodies. Maybe they're familiar with them, or maybe they could see that this is a real, raised person from the dead. I don't think they were like zombie types, like these stupid movies. Just saying, dirt all over them. That's really gross and creepy. Nah. But no, I don't think so. But I also believe, did they die again? Like Jairus' daughter, who was raised from the dead? How about Lazarus, who was raised from the dead? The son of Nain, raised from the dead? Different ones that Jesus rose from the dead. Did they, go back dead? I don't know. It seems like to me, and this is what I think happened, it's very possible, and I'm going to try and draw this here, because of other scriptures, which I'm not going to get into, because it's just too long, and and also there's, when we get to those passages, we'll really sink our teeth into it. But let's say this is the earth here. It seems like, very clearly, it seems like when you die, there's a grave here, or maybe you're in a tomb. You're in a tomb here. Here's a tomb. Yeah, okay, so you die, and then the departed souls before Jesus raised from the dead, all the people died, and probably they went, like the Bible calls it, lower parts of the earth and all. Maybe their souls go there, maybe. That's what I think. Heart of the earth, the belly of the earth, like Jesus said, that as Jonah was, as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so must the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. So anyway, so souls go into a waiting period at a time. In my opinion, they did not go up to heaven. People at that time, they went into a place called Abraham's bosom, or like that's in Luke 16, or like paradise and all. But it's possible he went there. So the Greek word is Hades, okay, and it's actually the word grave, is one of the things. At least Sheol is a grave in the Old Testament, or actually it's one of the Greek words for the word hell. Now, it's possible that what seems reasonable, especially because of Luke 16, that passage, I'm not going to go into it too much, this is too long, but it seems like there was let's say there was a region here, like this, and then there was a region here, lower pit. And this seems like the bad part of Hades, and then the happy part, or the good part. I'll just say happy, good. The good part. So the souls of the righteous people, saints, and good people, people who loved God, who served God for centuries, like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all the wonderful men and women of God in the past, go there. Most people go here, unfortunately. And there's a big gulf. There's a separation here. Well, it's possible that Jesus, when he died for 3 days, it talks about him like in 1 Peter 3 and other things. He seemed to be kind of busy. His spirit, his body was in the grave, but his spirit left him just like we do. Our souls and spirits, in my opinion, leave. And he came, and he came probably down here. He also preached to the spirits in prison, which were disobedient. Those could be demon powers and all that. And he came, and he didn't preach good news. The Greek word is to proclaim. And I think maybe he was proclaiming victory. Like I came, and I have now finally given victory over what? Sin, over death. That Jesus Christ came. He talked to a group down here who was locked up. It doesn't say he went to all the evil and wicked people, but it seems like he may have come here, and maybe he just said, I'm going to take some of these guys up when he rose from the dead, that they came alive. And it's kind of like showing the people there and us who is reading that he's kind of giving the evidence that you're going to be resurrected. So he brought many of them. Maybe he gave the chief ones, like the real mighty saints, like the Abraham, David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, the great heroes of the faith in the past. Maybe he decided to bring them up and let them actually appear. They appeared. And then maybe they appeared and then went, and then they went up with him, maybe as he ascended later, and they weren't visible. The Bible doesn't say they were visible, but they went up as spirits. Now this is all guess. Who knows? But it's exciting. I mean, this is like, I think it's saying that Jesus resurrected. He's not going to be the only one. He decided to prove to others in reading this, us and others who actually saw them. Yep, there's a resurrection day coming, and that's yet to come, the future one, when all the saints are brought up, And so they literally came up, were visible, because it says they appeared, and then they all actually went into heaven. I don't know. It's just really cool stuff. Let me read it again. It's like, wow. It says, it was right at the time, or right after the time, that the veil of the temple was rent, because it says, and behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks were split, they were torn in two, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept, that's another way of saying died, arose, came up, and came out of the graves after his resurrection. Now there is a possibility that the graves were open and they were awakened and they just waited there for 3 days. I don't think so, but it's possible. It sounds like it if you read it very carefully. Read it very carefully. It sounds like when that thing was torn, the graves were open. Many of the bodies which slept arose. They rose up, and then it says, and came out of the grave after his resurrection. It seems like that's when they were raised from the dead, particularly because he is called the person who had the first fruits. He's not the first person that ever raised from the dead. He is the first person that ever raised from the dead and stayed living. Like I love Revelation 1:18, I am he that lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Other people who were raised from the dead miraculously in the Old Testament, and what Jesus raised from the dead, and what Paul and Peter raised from the dead, they raised from, like Dorcas and all that. They literally died again. They didn't go up. But these guys, who knows where they went? It doesn't say. And I think they literally went ahead and went with him. I think why would they? It's possible they could rise from the dead. See, we're going to be rise, and then they died again. I tend to not think so. I think they went right with him. Anyway, thanks for listening. Fascinating scriptures. We come there's once in a while, ever so often, you come across verses that are really full of mystery, and there's questions. I don't question it, but there are like, what is this? Now, there are people that say this is all symbolic and all that. It's metaphoric poetry, kind of the feeling didn't really happen. I don't think so. I think it's historical because it sounds just like history, like he's telling the story and it really happened. All right. God bless you. Thanks for listening.